All right, friends, welcome. We are, if you guys can already believe it, we are in week 13. This week, what we're going to be learning is login and registration. You guys are able to see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to be learning login and registration. We're going to be talking about securing a password and then certain things we can do to kind of prep and make sure that if somebody's signing up, some preventions we can have built in. Once we learn this today, you will have everything you need in order to take the exam. So we will have built everything that if you can, kind of replicate that, you will be ready and good to go to take the exam, which kind of leads us into next week. Next week's going to be a belt prep week. Some things that I'll show you, just kind of things, points to make sure you remember what to expect on the exams. That's what Tuesday will be, is like what to expect on the exam, how it's going to go, things to remember, and things to kind of know. And then on Friday, the exam actually opens. Now, as a reminder, you have to have 90% of your core assignments completed in order to get a code. And so the way it'll actually work is I will be sending out a code probably Thursday after class. I'll kind of do a check and then I'll send out a code, or Friday morning, one of the two. I'll let you know next week. That basically just says, hey, here's an email. You're at 90%. Here's your code. That code will be open from the 12th all the way to the 24th. So this is actually incorrect. Everything is due at 11:59 p.m. Oh yeah. Nope. Yeah, that's right. Actually, no, it's Wednesday. Everything is due at 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday. Now Thursday we'll still have like a office hour if you guys want, kind of like an algo class, kind of the last one. But everything is due this Wednesday. Now that includes your core assignments and your discussion questions. So please make sure that you guys are doing those. Even your discussion questions are due that day, so you don't really have a full week. So please make sure you do those. Let me get this over.
I thought it was 70% for the discussion questions.
I believe it's 80. I will confirm, but I believe it's 80.
Okay.
Sorry
Yeah.
I'm late, guys.
Hey, Estrella. We
Hey.
almost canceled class just because we're like, Estrella's not here. There's no need,
You're funny.
Yeah.
Too funny.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so Estrella, we're just going over kind of what to expect these next couple weeks. Today, again, we are doing our login and registration. You have one core assignment this week, which is login and reg. And then next week is going to be just about prep. So on Tuesday, we're going to go over kind of what to expect on the exam. And what I mean on the exam, I mean what to expect when it comes to the exam, how it's going to look, kind of the process of that. Not really like this is what you're going to have. I will touch on a couple things that always kind of trick students. So I will try to give you guys as much information as I can. That'll be Tuesday. Thursday, we'll be covering anything else that I didn't quite hit, but we'll probably just have like another algo. And then on Friday, you will get your belt exam code. Now that code does not expire until Wednesday, the 24th. Now, it expires the 24th, but you have up to 3 chances to take the exam. And the reason I say up to is because if you wait until Wednesday, it's due at 11:59 p.m. So you have 24 hours when you input the code, as long as you start the code by 11:59 on Tuesday. That gives you the full 24 hours. If you started at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, it is still due at 11:59 p.m. So just because you started on Wednesday, you're foregoing your 24 hours. That's point number one. So make sure if you want to get the full 24 hours, you have to start it by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday. Secondly, you have up to 3 chances to take the exam. So let's say, you take it on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. I'll grade it on Monday. And if you need to, I can give you another code, et cetera, et cetera. You can do that up to 3 times. Now, if you wait until Tuesday or Wednesday to take your first exam and you fail, you don't get 2 more chances, right? You're sort of foregoing, if you're waiting, you're foregoing your opportunity to have multiple chances at it, because whether you use 1 or 3, all you can do is they have to be due by 11:59 p.m. So if you want to take advantage of the 3, I would say, I would definitely say start this first week. Start this first weekend. Even if you're like, I'm not quite ready, that's okay. Just kind of get a feel for it. Then you can build off and say, okay, now I know what to expect. I can go back. I can work with TAs to see, here are the things that were confusing to me. Let me work with that. I can get you a new code. You can try it again. And then worst case scenario, you've got a third attempt to take that exam. Now, again, you do have to have 90% of core assignments completed in order to qualify. So if that's the case, on Friday, I will send out a message that says, hey, here's your belt exam code, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to make sure you have that. Cool. I will just say, as a word of caution, I just finished a class. There was a handful of students who waited until this last day to even take their first one. And it created a lot of anxiety for them. And just transparently, they didn't set themselves up well. And some of them ended up just not passing. So my encouragement would be, don't wait until the last minute. Like, you might feel like, oh man, I need to, there's still so much I need to know. That's okay. But at least try your first one. I'm gonna ask you guys, at least try your first one by next Wednesday. Or by the 17th, sorry, the first Wednesday, just to try it, right? Open it up, get a feel for it, try it, go from there, give an attempt. And if you're like, this isn't going to work, you don't even have to submit it. That's okay. Just once your 24 hours is gone, that's fine. Just don't even submit it, but get a feel for it. So that way you guys aren't waiting until the last second for that. Any questions on the exam? Cool.
So once you start the exam, you have 24 hours to submit it.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you hear
And
me?
you have yep, I can
That's
hear
right.
you.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you have,
Okay.
so once you start it,
Um,
so there's kind of 3, sorry, it says my internet's connection's unstable. So hopefully it's not unstable.
You're still good. You're still good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let me know if I'm lagging or anything. So you have up to 3 chances and you have 24 hours. If you do it, so there's kind of 3 tiers of belt exam you can go, and this is only because it's a full-time language. The first tier is you just do it within 24 hours. You do everything. That's what we call an orange belt. Basically, you did it within your 24-hour period. Now, if you do everything, so same criteria as the orange belt, but instead of within 24 hours, you do it within 5 hours. That's what qualifies as a red belt. Do employers know the difference? Absolutely not. They don't know. This is more of a you thing if you want to strive to get a red belt. And then there's going to be some advanced stuff. If you think about the assignments, how we have like, okay, here's what you have. You have a ninja bonus, and you have like a sensei bonus. Those sensei bonuses, those harder things, there's going to be a couple of those. If you complete those, all the criteria for the red or the orange belt, plus you do the sensei stuff or the extra stuff, and it's still within 5 hours, that's what you qualify for a black belt. That's the highest one you can get. Those are available to you. So just making sure that you guys are aware of that. Again, just try to pass it, and then go from there. We'll talk more about that when we get to the belt prep, some kind of practices there. The last thing I'm going to say, and I just want to make sure that this is abundantly clear because I've dealt with this issue for the last couple of days. You guys, as you know, are the last flex program.
Flex. Yeah. Yes.
So
we're working. Oh,
there
it's about
is
to get
no
real.
retake. Yes, it's about to get real, but unfortunately there is no retake option. That's why I would say really try to take the exam the first weekend. Because if you get to this point and you don't take the exam by Tuesday, you have 24 hours. And if you don't pass, you don't get to retake, right? That's the end of your time here. So, and that's created a lot of it. That just adds so much more anxiety, right? And so I would just say, I want to be abundantly clear. There is no, I had some students who were like, I'll just take a retake and just didn't do anything. And then the last week on Monday, I'm like, hey, I don't have anything from you. I'm kind of expecting all this. And like, I'm just going to retake. And they weren't clear that there's no retakes. That is not an option. So you have to pass in order to continue forward. So just want to make that abundantly clear. Any questions on that?
No, not at all.
Cool.
We had to sign a form letting us
Mhm.
know that we weren't gonna take a retake, so it's just
Yeah.
getting closer to the big day.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can do it. I promise. Okay.
Thank you.
Jeffrey,
not- is it-
Kevin, anything from you guys?
Yeah, so is the exam, it's not particularly challenging, is it? I mean, if we finished all the assignments, we shouldn't have any, and if we've gotten everything to run, we shouldn't have any issue passing the exam.
I would say that if you can do, this will be a great, great kind of exercise. If you guys can do recipes, I would encourage you to try recipes. If you can do this, then yes, you should be fine for the exam. You must be able to do this, and then you'll be fine for the exam. So that should be your sort of kind of North Star on what to expect there. So recipes, if you can do that, that should be, and if you have issues on it, then that's a good example. But you guys should, after today, you should have all the information. So get started on recipes early, right? The other thing you can
Okay.
do is you can come in with a working login and registration. And so you don't have to sort of build that from scratch. You can have a working login and reg, which is what we're going to do today. And that's what your assignment is this week. You can have that working going into the exam and just use that. Now, the only thing you'll have to kind of be aware of is if you have a working login and registration, meaning you have a user model and you have this register and login. If, let's say, for example, you put first name, last name, email, password, confirm password. Let's say that if there's another field called age, right? That was first name, last name, age, email, password, confirm password. Then just be aware, okay, where in your code are you gonna have to go change and add age, right? So that's like the caveat with coming in with a working login and reg. Just be aware if you need to change it, where you need to change it. But again, you can come in with a working user model. You can come in with a working forms with login and registration. And then you'll just have to kind of make the connection and go back and forth that way. Cool.
Sounds good. Quick question, Will.
Yeah.
Because with the recipe, I see is it confirm password, right? On
Mhm.
the ER, you said we don't need to do that, right? I mean, like the confirm.
No, yeah. Yeah. So if you remember, we even did that in our code
Yeah.
where all we're doing with the confirm password is we have that in our validator. But yeah, you don't want to put that in your ERD because we don't want to save the same information twice. So if it's the same, it works and we create a user, we don't need it twice. We just need the one password.
That's right.
And so while we're taking the exam, it's an open book, open note type of
Yeah,
thing.
it's open universe, meaning you can use my lectures, you can use anything. The only thing you can't use is AI. So can't
Okay.
use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini Pro or any of those. And the way that we'll know that is I go through your code, and if I see, some really, really advanced code, what I'll honestly do is just call a meeting and say, explain this to me. And if you can't explain it, then I'm going to know that it's AI, right? And I've we've been together for long enough that I sort of know your guys' code and your coding ideology. So if you have this really, really advanced Python Lambda, I might say, hey, help me understand, what you're doing here. But that's it. But yeah, it's open universe, open note. You can use the platform. You can use anything you need. Use Google. So cool. Any other questions?
Apart from functionality, what else are you gonna be looking for, Will?
So I'll share with you guys on I'll share with you guys on next Tuesday, kind of what I'm looking for, but it's really just functionality. Did you modularize your code? That's a portion of it. Do you have a working login and registration? If you don't have that, there's a couple things that are like, let's say you just didn't do login and registration, that's an automatic fail. Because that's a core piece. Do you have working CRUD? Do you have validations? Again, if you're looking at recipes, it's a lot of this, right? Where you've got registration validations, login authentication, users must be logged in to view this page. Show only, edit, and delete if the links of the recipe create logged in user. Like that kind of stuff is what we'll do on Tuesday to kind of like help you. We'll kind of make sure that this is all. A lot of this stuff is the same. But yeah, if you can do this, this is going to be the expectation.
Okay.
And then same thing of like in the back of your code, instead of here, how we're doing like video game data, we actually have video game instances. I'm looking for that compared to if you just pass me a dictionary of information that I can't use or that I can read, but I can't do anything with. So that's what, like this line, for example, is represents something that I'm going to be expecting. Cool. Okay. I do want to, if there's any more questions, we are going to talk about this all next week. So we can save them unless they're super pertinent. But what I want to talk about is we are talking about our, not week 15, talking about login and registration. So we already have registration built. Now we called it kind of just create user, right? But it's the same thing, right? All registration is doing is you're creating an account, or if you're logging in, then there might be something different that we need to do. So this create user represents our register. So we've already created that. Now there is one thing that we're going to do that we're going to build in. But we'll kind of get there. So let's work on a couple different things first and foremost. Now, if we're on the platform and we're sort of looking at this validations, we stopped at kind of this cookie order validations. That's what your assignment was last week. So now we're moving forward, and the first part is we want to talk about securing passwords. So as you might expect, when we're looking in MySQL and we're saving our passwords, if we actually look at our data, and let me look up MySQL Workbench, and we'll actually show kind of what we're talking about here. Okay, so we got this GameDB. And in this tables, we have games and users. And if I were to, I want that DB and I want select all from users, you can see that right now our password is just this plain text, right? This is a no-go. You never, ever, 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 ever want to store sensitive information, let alone a password is plain text. The reason is because databases get hacked all the time. Whether we like it or not, that's really just kind of right now where we're at. Hackers are brilliant. Hackers are smart. And so what they do is they go in and they go into a database and they can steal information. There's a million ways they do this. They do social engineering. They actually find a vulnerability in your code or in your program or your operating system that your program runs on. There's a whole bunch of different ways. And what they'll get is this information. They try to get your user information. Now, the reason they try to get your user information is because let's say that my dog Charlie made this account, and maybe we're a video game company, no big deal, right? But a lot of people, and I hope this isn't you, use the same password for everything. If you do, if that is you, that's okay. I would really encourage to look into a password manager. I use NordPass is what I use, but there's LastPass, there's I think like Bitwarden, there's a lot of good ones. But look into a password manager to prevent that from happening. But let's say my dog Charlie does just use one password, and this is just a video game thing, it's no big deal. Well, if somebody finds or gets this information, if a hacker hacks information, they will then sell it to the dark web or sell it to, usually it's on the dark web, but they'll sell it to nefarious people who will then take that email and password and try it at all financial institutions, try it at different places, right? Your, not only your banks, but your social media, your, Fidelity account, your stocks account, like all these things that maybe, your company, do I work for, if I worked for Microsoft and maybe I was on the AI team of Microsoft and they wanted those secrets, they could use that and say, well, does that person then use the same password when they're logging into Microsoft, and now they have access to all my emails, they can see what's coming, et cetera, right? And so that's why there's such a market for that. And so first and foremost, we never store them as plain text. The reason is because if this gets leaked, then they're going to immediately see that this is my email, this is my password, and they can go and they can kind of run those. So what do? Well, first and foremost, we do what we call hash our password. We use a hashing algorithm in order to hash our password. Now, this is a great, there's quite a bit of stuff in here, so I'm not going to read it obviously to you, but I would love for you guys to read it. But there's quite a bit of different ways that we can hash our password. Really what a hash is sort of creating, if you will, one of those kind of, cryptography, like a cryptogram sort of thing, to where, instead of it saying password, it says something like this, right? This represents the word password in its own weird, odd way. Now you might see like, well, that's way longer than password. We also can add something called salt, which just makes it even more challenging for somebody to break, right? Because what salt is just extra length to our character or extra characters in our password algorithm. And so when we first hash our password, we have this base hash, right? And we don't understand, developers don't understand how it works. That lives within the actual hashing algorithm itself. So, we don't know, 5FDC represents P. We don't have any of that, right? It's just the algorithm builds that. And I don't, do the people who built the algorithm know? Probably not, right? But it's a way that can kind of scramble things so that way we can't pick it up. Now, that said, hashing's not irreversible, or so, sorry, hashing's not reversible. But it's not something that always works 24/7. And what do I mean by that? Back in the day, we used to have MD5 and SHA-1, which were algorithms that hashed our password. And what ended up happening is they were so, used and they weren't kind of the best ones. They were the best that we had at the moment. But hackers over time had broken those passwords. And so they knew that, maybe this represented password. And so what they did is created these things called rainbow tables. And all a rainbow table is back with the MD5 and SHA-1, they would say, hey, if you've got this string, that represents password. And so if there was a data break or a data breach and you had this information, you could run it against a rainbow table and see, do I know any of these passwords already? Right? Because somebody's already cracked it and they said, all right, here it is. So then you can kind of go look up your string and see if it's been cracked or not. That's what we call a rainbow table, and that's SHA-1 and MD5. Those are antiquated. Those are not things that we use. So now what we do is we don't only hash them or create that kind of different, a hashed algorithm, or use our hashed algorithm to create a new string. We had what we call salt, and salt is a random number of characters. It could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 3, right? And so what that does is it prevents our hacker from even knowing, first off, how much salt did we use? So we don't know, what are they looking at? Are they looking at, this string, we use 0 salt. And so they're trying to crack that. Did we use 5 or 10 or 12 characters? It's such an arduous process that it takes too much computational power to try to brute force crack these codes. And so you can see here that we can add salt and we can add passwords, and it kind of helps make it even more complicated for hackers to use. Now, the goal is not to prevent hackers from being able to break it, because unfortunately, that's that's not the case. And especially with quantum computing, if that ever happens or when that comes, um, things that, might take 200 years with the current technology that we have to brute force this, might take 6 minutes, right? And so, that's why, if you guys have seen, maybe you have, or maybe you haven't, Apple, Google, and Microsoft all signed a pledge to actually get away from passwords. And so in the future, it will be passwordless, ideally. They want to use all biometrics to where it's your Face ID, it's your thumb, because that's much harder to replicate. And really you can't for right now. So we're not trying to stop them from cracking our stuff. We're just trying to slow them down as much as possible. And so enters bcrypt. Now there is another one that I would say that's very popular. That one is called SHA-256. SHA-256 is also very popular. Bcrypt is the most popular for like passwords. And again, is because it is slow. It's really challenging for them to try to break this or try to crack a bcrypt one, like hundreds of years in order for them to crack just one. And so then hackers are saying, it's not worth that. It's really expensive energy wise to try to use these, NVIDIA graphics or GPUs or CPUs to try to crack this stuff. It just doesn't make sense. You can make more money on Bitcoin. You can make more money doing other things. And so we use bcrypt to actually hash our passwords, hash and salt our passwords. So what we're going to do is we're going to install bcrypt. Now, I talked about it last class, but we want to make sure we pip env install flask bcrypt. A lot of students in the past course just did bcrypt, and that's not going to work, right? Because we're doing a Flask application. It has to be Flask bcrypt. So if we go to our code, I can say pip env install Flask bcrypt. Okie doke. Cool. So now if I say pip list, cool. We see that we got Flask bcrypt. All right, we are good to go to start using it. Now, in the controller file that we are using bcrypt. Now, again, bcrypt is for passwords. We don't need to do this. We don't need to, encrypt anything within our video games. We don't need to do that. So what we're going to do is in our actual file here, in our controller, sorry, let me go back to that. In our controller, for our user, we are going to bring in this information. So I'm going to, at the top, say from Flask bcrypt import bcrypt. Cool. Oops. Great. Now, yep. I'm getting a weird error though. Flask bcrypt port. All right, that's okay. Okay. Now, what we also need to do is we need to create a bcrypt object by just doing this. So we're going to say bcrypt. This could just be at the top here. Perfect. From Flask bcrypt. I'm wondering why that is red. Oh, Flask underscore. So see, it's underscore bcrypt and I did a dash. That's why it's not liking it. Okay, there we go. Cool. So now that we've made our bcrypt object, we can actually generate a hashed password. And the way that we do that is we're going to go into the area that we register. So in this case, we're calling it creating a user. Again, they're the same thing. But in here, we are creating our user, right? And so what I want to do is this is why it has been so important that when we are taking information from our form, we are putting it in this data dictionary and not just passing, dot create user, request dot form. And it's because of this right here is I want to say PW hash equals bcrypt, which is what we called it up here. And that has a method called generate password hash. And we're saying, hey, I want you to generate a password hash. And we are passing in the password that our user gives. And so it's saying, hey, I want you to hash this password. The password that the user created, hash that. So
So-
first and foremost, let me print this so we can see what it looks like. Did you have a question, Kevin?
Oh, yeah, really quick. So does PW hash, and what you're assigning to it, does it have to go right in between the if, not user and the data? Does it have to go, it has to go in that specific location?
Great question. It just has to be, yeah. So what I would say is this if statement, kind of checks to see if our data is valid anyway, right? So we don't want to go through the computation. It's going to be minute, but we don't need to generate that password if, something else is wrong. So we don't really need that. So we definitely want this first. And then the second thing is, yes, we want this before my data, because what we're going to end up doing is we're going to, instead of saying password is equal to request.form password, we're going to say password is equal to password hash, right? What's actually going to go into my database is my hash password, not my, password for my phone. So we have to establish this first so that, we can put it within my data object. And then when we pass it in here, it gets my actual hash password. So if I say pi server.py, and I come here, create user, I'll just do password just so you guys can see. And so now when I create user, cool. It goes, we created our user, but if I refresh this, let me refresh. Let's see. What did it not do well? This is something that is very important. I'm glad we got this here. We got this, something went wrong, data too long for column, password at row 1. So if we look here and we see this, I have this password at 45 characters. I have this password at 45 characters.
Oh, so I limit it. It wouldn't
Exactly.
take it. That's why you got the
So
error.
I'm going to reverse engineer this. GameDB. And I'm going to change this to, let's say 255. Cool. That should work now. Yep,
Well,
255. Yeah.
Quick question. Now that you did the reverse, did you delete all the information you already inputted?
Yes.
Did you drop this? Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
was
Oh,
just
I'm gonna
like,
have
mistake-
to. I'm gonna have to come here
Like,
and then drop schema.
okay.
Let's try it. Let's try it and see. But I believe I do have to drop the schema. So now that I've changed it, now that we've got 255 here, let's forward engineer. Seeing if there's anything that I can like write over. I think we're good. Okay, so now in my local instance, if I come here and I refresh. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I am going to, and this is just just to kind of make it easy right now. I'm just going to drop this one. Drop schema. Okay. And then I'm going to go back now, Ford Engineer. Close. Okay. Refresh. Okay, so game DB is there. I have my users. It's now 255. Okay. Let's go back to localhost 5000. Just going to create user. I can create Charlie again. I'm gonna do password 123. Okay. So now what we can see is now we've got if we come here, this is what it used to be. So this was password. Now if I run this, gotta make sure I select my database. Now this is the password that's saved. This whole string is what is saved. So even if our password gets compromised, right, our database gets compromised, this is what the users are getting. So they might get our email, our first name and our last name. This happens all the time. Guaranteed your stuff has been, leaked at some point. But
Multiple
hopefully,
times.
yeah, hopefully, somebody's hashing your passwords. And so this is what they're getting. So they can't really do anything with that. Unless, the company is using SHA-1 or MD5. But that's what we're doing, right? Is we are making sure that even if our stuff got hacked, it's really important that we hash our passwords. And you can do this. You don't just have to do this with passwords. So like, let's say user IDs, or you wanted to use something else. You had some other sensitive information. Social security numbers would be another absolute. It needs to be hacked or hashed and salted. Those are two main things, right? That you would want to always make sure that those are hidden and people can't see those. Okay. So we have officially done that. We passed it into ours. So if we look at our code, we're able to pass that in and create our user with our actual information, right? And so again, be aware of just doing it at 45, 255 should be fine. Cool. Now, what do we want to do next? This has already been, we've already handled that. Now we need to handle login. So we don't have that. We just have a register, but now we want to handle our login, right? So once you register, we want you to be able to log in. So let's go do that. In my user form, I'm going to create this as it's weird that I had it like that. I'm going to, I'm going to say register. And then I'm going to do I'm going to do these. I'm going to do this in a row. I think that's where I want it. Yep, one more. I think it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So what I want to do is I've created this this, right? And I'm just going to do on one side I want register, on the right I want the other. So I'm going to say dot call medium 4 maybe. And so this is going to be an H1 that says login. And all it's going to have is a form that's going to be of post. We called it user/create. So I'm going to call it user/login. And its method is post. We know that to be true. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to have a dot form group. And it's going to be a label for email. And we're going to have one more for password. And then I need a button to log in. Call this secondary. Cool. And that's the end of my form, right? Now, it should be fine that these are named the same thing, right? Like password, because it's going to be the form that's actually passing it that gives the request. So we should be okay. If you felt weird about it, you could call this log email, log password. That's okay too. Okay. So what we want to do, if we just kind of get this is still running. Let's go back to just my create user. And now we have a register and login. Cool. So we have login, register. I want to move my button a little. So I'm going to say MT3, and that moves my button down a little bit. Cool. Now I got this login and register. So I need to handle the functionality of what happens when somebody does user/login. So let's go to that. Let's go. We don't have that. I like personally to kind of put my register and then log in. It totally doesn't matter. Totally up to you. But I want to say something like app route user/login. Methods is post. We know that this is a post request. It's coming from my form. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually walk through this quite a bit. So we're first and foremost going to grab our email, right? So we just have this login user method, and we are going to grab from it, we're going to grab our email. Now, what we're going to do with that email is I'm going to say user equals user.getOneUser. Let's go in and see if we have getOneUser. I have getUser with games, getOneUser we do, right? And what that brings me back is the class instance of the first value, because remember, this is a list of dictionaries. It should only be one dictionary. But it's going to give us, oh, this is interesting. We're going to do something different. See, this is where AI is not going to take over because this would be wrong. Right now, we say get one user, and we select all from users where ID equals the ID, right? But we don't have the ID. I don't know that. I just have their email address. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new method that's going to say def get one user by email. Oops, by email. Yeah, this is fun. To where we're going to create a query that's very similar. But what we're wanting to do is go in and say, all I have access to is this user, right? Or this email. Does this user exist? That's what I'm kind of looking at. They're trying to log in. I want to see, do I have information for this user? All we have is their email or their password. And we're not going to go in and say, does this password match? You know, we're not going to do it by password because two people might have the same password. No bueno. So we want to do it by email. So we're going to say select all from users where email matches the email that's being passed through. That's why we take this and we pass it through here. Now, one thing I want to point out is if you called this log underscore email, then right here, remember it needs to be log underscore email. I would just keep it at email. You don't need to mess it up, but just be aware of that. And then as a reminder, what is on the left is what is being represented here. So if you put log email here, or you put log email on this side, then this is going to refer as log email, right? So that's whatever we're passing through. Cool. So that's my query. We're just grabbing it by the email saying, hey, do we have any users with this email? And we're going to say, okay, cool. We're going to create this variable called user, and that's going to be equal to whatever is given back here. Now, remember, that query is going to give me back a value, right? It's going to give me back a list of objects or a list of dictionaries. We're then going to say if the length of user is just a list at this point, because remember our select always gives us a list of objects. If it's less than 1, what that tells me is we don't have a user in my database that matches that email. Because if I had a user in my database that matches that email, it's going to bring it and it's going to give me that, right? And so it's going to say it's less than 1. Or if that's less than 1, then what we're going to do is we're going to return none. And we'll see how we handle that on the other end. If it gets to line 41, what does that tell us? If it makes it all the way up to line 41, what's that say? What's that say about, be more clear, about line 39?
So that means, so you said line 39, if they don't have, if there's no user, then you're gonna get none. So 41 should be like, if you do have a user, it should pull that 1.
Exactly. Remember that anytime a function sees a return statement, it's done running. And so if it's less than 1, then anything less than 1, right? Then it's going to return, it's going to enter into this statement and it's going to return none. And in that case, this function would be done running and it would never read line 41. If it gets to line 41, that tells us that this was false, that it was 1 or more, right? Because if it was true, if it was less than 1, then we would never read line 41, right? So we're assuming if we make it this far, this is a really common thing in coding, that we don't have an if else. We just say, okay, if this, then return. But if I get to here, then I'm assuming that it's not returning. Therefore, that's not true. So we're saying, okay, we have a user. It's 1 or more. Let's just return the actual user at the first position, which it should just be 1 dictionary. But it's a class instance of the value at the first position of user. Remember, user is just a list, just that first position. Does that make sense? So basically, we're going to go in, we're going to look at our database. If we have anything in there, it's going to skip line 39 because it's false, and it's going to return this. If there isn't anything in there, it's going to enter into my conditional statement. It's going to go to line 40. It's going to return the word none. Any questions on that?
No.
Cool. Now back here, we're running get one, what do we call it? Get one user by email. So we're going to say by email. Cool. And we're passing in that email, right? So whatever email they give. If the user equals none, meaning that if the user equals none, meaning that there was no email that matches, we're just going to redirect back to my form. Now, what I could do is say, because we have flash in here, is I could say, before you even return, I want to say flash email or password is incorrect. And then I'm going to give it a category of login. We never want to say, hey, your email is right, but your password is wrong. And this is because if a nefarious actor gets an email and they say, okay, does this person even have an account at Wells Fargo, right? If we say, hey, your email is good, but that's the wrong password, then we're saying, okay, cool. And they can go and try a bunch. That's when they brute force. And vice versa. I say, hey, like I saw, it's kind of satirical, but somebody said, hey, that's the wrong password. That password belongs to blank. And they gave like a username, which is like the worst thing you could do, right? Say, actually, the password you just posted is somebody else's, because then you just go to their information, plug it in. So we always just say email or password is incorrect. So this is sort of how we can show a visualization of that. and we're just gonna redirect back to user. So if it's none, redirect back to user. I'm gonna pause there. Are there any questions?
No, I actually was gonna ask you about what if the password or the user, or I mean, the email or the password was wrong. I was like kind of thinking like, what if it is wrong? What if there's none, but or they have one, but they have the inputted the wrong information?
Mhm.
And then you talked about the flash, so I was just like, okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, if you
trying to
think
think
about it,
ahead.
Yeah, anytime you've put in an incorrect email or password, it's always just gonna say email or password is incorrect. It's never gonna say, hey, email but wrong password. Cool. And then we could create a flash, we could just do this at the top here within this. But instead of this, we just say login. So if within my flash, there is, we have login, then it'll give me the error, right? It'll just say email or password is incorrect. Cool. Now, let's say that we did get something back, so it's not none. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say if not, and again, this is going to check to say, is this giving me true or false, right? Here is where you might ask yourself, hey, if we can't unhash a password, how do we check it? Well, bcrypt does all the heavy lifting for us. So bcrypt has a method called check password hash, where we can pass in, now my user is my user instance that's coming back, right? If it gets here and we have user and we get to that level, then we're assuming that this user instance is coming back. And user is going to have a password. So we want to check the password that we got back from our database with the password that the user passed in from my form. This request.form password. Now, again, if you were to change that to log password, it would say request.form log_password. Bcrypt will do that. So this is going to evaluate as true, they are good to go, or false, they're not good to go. If false, we're going to redirect as well. And you could do, you could bring in flash up here. I'm not going to do it now, but you could bring in flash up here and do the same thing. Say, password is incorrect. I'll just grab it real fast. Oops. You can do flash messages, because remember, all we're doing is we're saying from Flask import flash. So up here, I just say flash. And then I say, all right, if that's not the case, create a flash message that says email or password is incorrect. We log in. So we do have an email, but the passwords aren't, that password you submitted is not the same as what's in my database. If both of these things pass, so if it gets to line 41, the same way, we are assuming that it did not enter into this, meaning that the passwords were good. And we're assuming we did not get none back, meaning we actually got a user. So we got a user, cool. And the passwords matched, cool. We can let them into our, into our website. So first and foremost, we put our user ID in session, user ID, and then we just redirect them to user dashboard. So now we should have a fully functioning login and registration. To where if I create a user, I'm saying Marley calm@c.com, oops. Password 112, password 112. I create my user. Great. We don't have a logout feature, but I'll show you how to do that in just a second. And then let's say we are here, right? We might need to change our functionality. That's okay. But if this happens, I should get redirected to my user dashboard. I should say m@c.com, password 112. Log in. Ooh. User has no attribute. Get one user. So this is a great thing to read, right? It has no attribute, get one user. Did you mean get on user by email? What's that tell you? Where would you guys go to fix this?
You have a typo in the controller.
Okay,
Most likely.
this one's get one user.
So that would have been the form, your HTML. I'm thinking, I'm looking.
This is correct.
Get one by user.
Where else could that be an error? Where is this calling? What file? Where
It's
does
calling
user-
The controllers
This is my controller.
let's see.
My controller's creating this object. It's creating a new variable. And where does user live?
It's
on in
let's
the
see.
models.
Model, yeah. That means that here I've got an error of get one. I put get on. So now I can
That
save
typo.
That typo.
I'm
That'll
telling
get
you.
you, man.
Yeah, it
It'll
does.
It'll get you. Okay. So now we refreshed. I can say m@c.com. Password 112. Now I log in. Cool. I'm in. Right? We are good. We selected all. So we select all where email is m@c.com. It goes and it gets that. It got a value back because we're good to go. Now, if I were to go back, now we're to say, ma@v.com. And I log in, I get redirected to email or password is incorrect. I don't know why this is showing up this way, but we can work on that.
So for our next assignment, that's pretty much all we have to do. This looks pretty much identical to our
Mhm.
next assignment.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the only other thing to add, and we might go a little bit over, but I'd rather do that than kind of wait, is when we are creating a user, so registering, one thing we'll want to do is we want to make sure people don't get multiple
Accounts.
multiple accounts. Yeah, exactly. So what's a way that you think we could prevent that from happening with what we now have?
I think with the user validator.
Validator?
Yeah, hold on, let me think. Because there's got to be a way to check like the same email.
Yeah, we
So
have
we will
that,
have
right?
to
We
create,
built.
yeah, so we'll have to make sure that when they're typing it, it's obviously is validating it that it's already in there or not for it to continue the process. So
What does this code tell me? So these 3 lines, what is in my login? What do those 3 lines tell me? Or what do they do?
it's pulling the information from the database.
By that
It's-
email.
Yes, if the user, if the email is not in the database, then they'll have to redirect to user.
So if we think about it, what we're wanting to do is if it's not in the database, that's good, right? Because we're saying, hey, we don't already have a user that has that. So what if we took this information and put it right here? Oops. I thought I copied it. Sorry. I'll just do this anyway. User equals user request.form. And I could say request.form and that's fine, but I'm going to be even more specific, email. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do my get one user by email. We know that either gives me back none or that gives me back an actual value. And so what I can say is if we have an actual value, right, then we don't want that. So what I can say is if the user does not equal none, or another way I could say if user That's it. But this is a little bit more spelled out. We know that if there's nothing in there, it's going to give us back none, right? And my, it's either going to give us back none or it's going to give us a value. So we're saying, hey, if it's not none, does not equal none. The opposite of that is we've got a value back. And I'm going to create a flash message that says email already in use. I'm going to apply it to email. And I'm going to redirect them immediately back to my user page or my login and registration page. If we get to line 23, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I see what you did with the request form email. You kind of like combine them. Because it's what we're pulling the information when we're pulling the information, but we're inputting the information kind of at the same time.
So before we even input it, right? So first off, we say, is it valid, right? Did we even get enough information for me to ping my database? Because remember, we want to make sure that if we're going to ping our database, we sometimes have to pay for that. So we want to make sure that we're, okay, first off, is it even enough information? Is it valid code for me to even, like, is it worth my time? Okay, it is, right? We get to line 18, we're assuming that or we know that the data has to be valid in order to get to line 18. We say, okay. But well, before we create, I'm going to go and see, do we currently have a user in my database that has that email? If we don't, we know that that's going to give us back none, right? And so this is maybe where we wouldn't have, actually, this is actually probably not a great idea. I'm going to take this out because that would automatically give us that. And I'm going to move that to, if it equals none, then we do this. That'll be better. Okay. Great. So what we're saying is I want to go get that. And if we get back none, then great. That user, you know, there's not a user that already has that database or that email, sorry. So if not, if user does not equal none, so if what we get back is anything other than none, then we're assuming that we got back an actual user, therefore that email is already taken. So we create a flash message, email is already in use, and we redirect it. Now again, if we get to a redirect, that's the end of the function, right? The whole thing's done running. So if we get to line 22, we know that this did not hit. It did not trigger this return, meaning that there's no current database, or there's no current email in our database that matches what they gave in the form. And this one didn't hit, so we know we have valid data. So we know we have valid data, and we know that this email doesn't already exist in our database. Okay, now I'm going to hash my password and get rid of that. Set up my information to pass it in and go actually create my user. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Nice. And that's it. That's all we have to do. The only thing I changed, and I'll tell you my thinking was I changed this flash message to come here. And the reason is because we're reusing this method of get one email or get one by email, what was going to happen is if I put it in here, then when it returns none, which is what we wanted, that's exactly what we wanted to happen is we wanted to return none. It was still going to create that error, right? Which isn't accurate. It's not an accurate error. So I moved that error to here. So that way, only when we want it to be an error, we'll show it as an error, right? Because in this case, we want it to be none. That's good. Okay. I'm going to stop. That's all I have for today. Are there any other questions on, sorry, we went 8 minutes over. Are there any other questions on login and registration, on bcrypt, on any of that?
No, not at the moment.
Um,
It's okay you went over. We needed this.
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's also pretty spelled out here. So it should, you know, they do a good job with these two login and registration or kind of pages.
We just need to stick with the flow. So that's why you were already with the flow. So you just
Yeah.
close it out.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay.
Kevin, you good?
Yeah. So when will this video be posted online?
I will stop as soon as I get done with this. It takes about 10 minutes to download and I'll throw it up on YouTube for you.
All right, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.